Good evening, I'm Mike Marza, recapping what has been another key day in the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. Another celebrity testified today in the federal sex trafficking trial of Mr. Combs. Performer Kid Cudi was on the stand, the rapper telling the tale of threats against Cassie Ventura and evidence showing an act of arson, prosecutors say, on Mr. Cudi's car, on Kid Cudi's car. One he says that Combs is the one behind. In a moment that you'll hear in just a moment, as we talk about exactly what went down at the Soho House in Los Angeles. A lot to get to. ABC News legal contributor Bernarda Villalona standing by to dig deeper into everything that unfolded in court. But first up, with a recap, here's Darla Miles.
Scott Muscati, Cassie Ventura, and Sean Combs, a romantic rivalry that federal prosecutors allege led to unthinkable acts of intimidation. The 34-year-old musician and actor known as Kid Cudi taking the stand Thursday morning. Muscati testifying today that he and Ventura dated in 2011 during a breakup with Combs. Also telling the court when Combs found out about the relationship, he got a frantic call from Ventura that she was nervous, stressed, and scared. The next phone call, Muscati says, was from Capricorn Clark, an employee for Combs, telling him that she, Diddy, and another person were inside of his house. Muscati telling the court that he immediately called Combs, recounting the conversation for jurors. He said, "Expletive, you in my house?" He was like, "Yeah, what's up?" I said, "Expletive, are you in my house?" He said, "I just want to talk to you." I said, "I'm on my way." He said, "I'm here waiting for you." Muscati going on to say when he got home, no one was there and he called the police. It was just 2 days ago when federal prosecutors showed the jury this email Ventura sent to her mother, dated 1 day after the break-in, claiming Combs was threatening to hurt Muscati. Then a few weeks later, in January 2012, Muscati says his dog sitter texted him these photos of his red Porsche, telling him his car was on fire. Prosecutors asking, "What did you see when you got home?" Muscati responding, "Just the damage. I saw the Molotov cocktail." "What was your reaction to the damage to your car?" Muscati telling the court his reaction was, "What the expletive?" But defense attorneys pointing the blame to Cassie Ventura, asking, "The person who played you, the person who played Sean, was Miss Ventura, true?" Muscati answering, "Yeah." And as to the two incident at Muscati's home, the defense asking, "There was no forced entry to the home." Muscati answering, "No." Defense attorneys also asking, "In the last 13 and a half years, have you been notified of any action in this case?" Muscati again answering no. Now, there are 4 other prosecution witnesses on the stand today, including a former personal assistant for Combs who said he quit after witnessing the violence with Cassie Ventura and another girlfriend. There was also a former makeup artist who says she saw injuries on Cassie Ventura, and a hotel manager who says they had to charge Sean Combs an extra $1,000 retainer whenever he reserved a room because he frequently left it dirty with candle wax and baby oil.
Our thanks to Darla Miles, joined now by ABC News legal contributor Bernarda Villalona. A lot to get to, as always, in this case. But let's start with Kid Cudi, because he was one of the more high-profile witnesses to take the stand. Take me to this moment. We're talking about the car that was firebombed. We saw the images of the car. You see the hole and the Molotov cocktail that was thrown in to light that fire. There was a moment that involved the Soho House, a meeting between Kid Cudi and Sean Combs, and the allegation of a supervillain. Take me through the testimony and what jurors heard today.
Oh, my God. So it was literally with this case is like can't stop, won't stop. There's always something going on. So in terms of Kid Cudi, so if we take it back a little bit, because it starts off with the breaking and entering in the sense that someone entered Kid Cudi's home and opened up some gifts that he had at the table. And supposedly there was a conversation between Sean Combs and Kid Cudi. And Kid Cudi was like cursing, "Are you at my house?" And Sean Combs says yes to that extent, but then when Kid Cudi goes there, Sean Combs is no longer at the house. Fast forward, dealing with this Molotov cocktail that is placed inside of the Porsche of Kid Cudi. Car blows up. We saw all the damage to his car. That very same day, Kid Cudi is like, he contacts Sean Combs and he's like, "We need to meet because this is going way too far." So that's when they have that meeting at the Soho House where it's Kid Cudi, it's Sean Combs, and at some point Cassie enters. But in terms of when Kid Cudi says he goes inside of the Soho House, inside of this meeting room where Sean Combs is, and that Sean Combs is looking out the window, and that he has both of his arms behind his back as a Marvel supervillain. Literally, the courtroom just started laughing at how Kid Cudi portrayed Sean Combs. But either way, they kill the beef, so to say, and says, like, look, I'm not with Cassie anymore. We're ending this. Like, this violence needs to stop.
Yeah, because when Kid Cudi said, what's up with my car, essentially.
Exactly. He says, what car?
What car?
What are you talking about, pretty much?
Really acknowledging it. Why was his testimony, Kid Cudi's testimony, so important for the prosecution?
So Kid Cudi's testimony is very important for the prosecution for the specific act, the predicate act, the racketeering act of arson. So in order to make out racketeering conspiracy, they have to prove, aside from the criminal enterprise, they have to prove that 2 predicate acts were performed. One of the predicate acts that the prosecution is alleging is one of arson. Now we know through Kid Cudi, when it comes to arson, they are talking about how it's alleged that Sean Combs was involved or personally involved in the bombing of Kid Cudi's car. So that's why it's important. Now the prosecution is trying to get through those predicate acts to try to get that racketeering conspiracy. It's going to take a while for the prosecution to get to proving racketeering conspiracy, because it involves so much when you have to prove the criminal enterprise and also the racketeering activity.
In the first week of testimony, we heard a lot about allegations of sex trafficking in different cities and different escorts and Cassie herself. What about the racketeering charge? How close are prosecutors to saying, haha, this is exactly what we were talking about in the opening?
Yeah, so they're getting there little by little, so they're jumping around a bit. So, for example, today they had Mr. Kaplan testify, who was Sean Combs' personal assistant for about 2 years. Now, in terms of how they were working him for the racketeering conspiracy, they got out through him that he helped set up the rooms for these freak-offs or for these night outs or hotel stays with Sean Combs. And also he purchased some of the items on the corporate credit card, bringing in the enterprise.
Gotcha.
That after Sean Combs would stay in these rooms for these lavish stays, that he will clean up the room. Remember that the room is always a mess because of all the baby oil and fluids and stuff.
And he felt a responsibility to protect the image.
Yes, and again,
Sean Combs.
protecting the image is part of the racketeering conspiracy that the prosecution is saying that the purpose of this criminal enterprise, aside from to carry out these criminal acts, but also to protect the image of Sean Combs. So they're inching at it little by little. They're not there yet, in my opinion. I think for them to get that racketeering conspiracy, I really think that they need a deep insider, a close confidant of Sean Combs to come in and testify and be like, look, I did this at the direction of Sean Combs, or to continue and further these acts that he wanted to perform.
And the defense, from the defense point of view, they're trying to say Sean Combs was violent. We see that on the video. Sean Combs assaulted Cassie Ventura.
There's no running away from it. It's on video.
Exactly, he's on video, and he's not charged with that, though. And so how effective has the defense been able to be in poking holes in the actual charges that Diddy's facing?
So let's be clear. He's not charged with domestic violence. These are federal crimes that he's charged with. But the domestic violence is important because the prosecution is saying the domestic violence, it was causing Cassie to not be able to willingly consent to these freak-offs, can't consent to this sex trafficking, because we heard from Dr. Hughes yesterday that because of the physical and emotional trauma that she suffered at the hands of Sean Combs, and because she's so traumatized where she feels hopeless and is not able to get out of this relationship because of the control that Sean Combs had over her financially, emotionally, physically, that she's not able to consent. So while we say domestic violence is not part of the charges, it's a part of the acts in the sense of involving Cassie. The defense is going to clearly continue to say, this is a domestic violence case. This is domestic violence. We're owning up to the domestic violence, but this is not sex trafficking. This is not transportation to engage in prostitution. And in terms of the racketeering conspiracy, what the defense is saying, there's no criminal enterprise here. whatever acts that other individuals within the business, within the corporation did, they did it independently aside from Sean Combs, and that no one's going to come in and say that they were part of a criminal enterprise, that they were part of this RICO conspiracy.
The former personal assistant finished his testimony today, Mr.
Yes.
Kaplan.
Yes.
Did we learn more about why he was asking for immunity?
So I think, first off, it's normal for a witness to ask for immunity. For example, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I used to be a prosecutor for 16 years. If I think there is any viable crime that you can charge my client with, and you want my client to come in and speak, yes, I want a proffer. Yes, I want an immunity, because I am not going to take your word for it that you're not going to come after my client. So I rather say, give him immunity, and then he'll testify in order to protect them. Because he testified, there's a few things he testified that could have opened him up to criminal liability. The narcotics. Narcotics. Possession of narcotics. Not that it's viable that the U.S. Attorney's Office is going to go after him, but you just never know.
Gotcha. Because that was the headline yesterday. He's asking for immunity. What does that mean? And so I'm glad you cleared that up.
And just to be clear with immunity, he cannot be prosecuted for any crimes that he may have testified to, with the exception of if he commits perjury. Immunity does not protect you against perjury.
Final question for today, turning to tomorrow, and court's on recess.
Yes.
So now you've got this break for Memorial Day, and that includes Monday as well. So you have then Friday, then you have Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. How does that play with the jury? I mean, they've heard so much up until this point. This is going to be the biggest break they've had.
So, Mike, I'm concerned. I'm concerned when there's ever a break in a long trial. And the reason why is because during that long break, people are watching the news. People are exposed to social media.
Even though they're not supposed to.
They're not supposed to be hearing, but it's inevitable to not hear anything about this case. It's being played everywhere. So I'm concerned about that, because what if someone is inadvertently exposed to media coverage about this case, and they're not supposed to be exposed to it, and though they start doing research about the case, or someone tampers with the jurors? You know, there's so much that could happen. We can come back on Tuesday. I wouldn't be surprised if someone tells me, oh, one of the jurors have something to say to the judge about something they may have been exposed to. So you just never know. But in terms of how does it also play, is that you have a long weekend where they're not listening to testimony. They can be thinking about the testimony, or probably doing some research when they're not supposed to. You just never know.
Interesting. We'll see how that plays out. 4 days is a long time when you think about this trial at such a quick pace so far, and then to come to a complete halt. Bernarda, always great to get your perspective. We appreciate it. So as we mentioned, the court resumes on Tuesday. That's when the testimony will start back up. Stay with Eyewitness News and ABC7NY for any new updates. We have a real-time blog of what's happening in the courtroom and the details from all the proceedings.